All right, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. You're all here today because you're interested in giving the GRE, that's the graduate record exam. And you may be interested in giving this exam for a number of reasons, right? So that is probably because you are applying for master's or PhD. Let me explain how you may do that. There's two routes to go about applying for master's or PhD. So one route is the independent route in which you'd directly apply to a university, and the university assesses your profile, your student profile, and then the university decides if you get admission or any scholarship along with that decision. So that is the independent or direct application route. The other route is through the Fulbright scholarship. So in this route, you don't apply to universities directly, you apply for the Fulbright scholarship. And if you are awarded the Fulbright scholarship, then the Fulbright Commission applies to universities for you on your behalf. And then they send you to the best possible university that you get accepted into. So these are the two routes of pursuing your graduate studies, be it master's or PhD. Now, if you have a STEM background or a business background, then the GRE is an exam which can dramatically increase your chances for getting scholarship in the direct application process. Whereas if you're applying through the Fulbright application, then the GRE is mandatory. That means that if you submit your Fulbright application without a GRE score, then your application will not be considered valid. It will be disregarded without the GRE score. So again, for Fulbright, you have to give the GRE. For direct or independent applications, you don't have to. For some universities, you have to. It depends on their requirements. For some, you don't have to. But even if you don't have to, it can dramatically help you fight your case for scholarships. And with that, let me just introduce Education USA, USEFP, and our speaker today. So Education USA is a global network under the US Department of State, made up of over 425 international student advising centers in more than 175 countries. We're your official source to US higher education. Advisors work with advisees to provide updated, comprehensive, and unbiased information on higher education in the United States. In Pakistan, we're part of the USEFP, that's the United States Educational Foundation in Pakistan, which houses the Fulbright Commission in the country. The USCFP promotes mutual understanding between the people of Pakistan and the people of the United States through educational and cultural exchange. We have offices in Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi, but we're available to any student who needs advising throughout Pakistan virtually. And with that, I would like to hand over our session to Haider Ali Shishmahal, and he is a great instructor for today's workshop because he has been awarded the Fulbright scholarship before and has gotten admitted into none other than Harvard University. So today is going to be a very, very beneficial session for everyone, hopefully. Heather, thank you as always. It's always a pleasure having you with us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, thank you, Zubair. Welcome, everyone. I'm seeing your names out there, so just want to say hi to Wahab, Ahmed Qazi, Ayman, Ali Haider, Amna, Aisha Khan, Aisha Sohail, Duraya, Faiza, Hasnain, Ihsan, Irfan, Jay, Kareemullah, Mas Khan, Maliha, Mohammad Abdullah, Mohammad Atif Siddiq, Mohammad Bilal, Mohammad Hasib Aslam, Umar Saeed, Usman Ghani, Munimul Haq, Nabila Bibi, more coming in, Nasser Hayat, Ramla Shazad, Saima Munir, Sana Khalid, Shah Fahad, Shiraz Farooq, wow, Tahir Raza, Tahir Azam, Tala Khan, Umair, Mubashir, Usman Ali, Uzair Bacha, Wafa Imtiaz, Wali Muhammad, Waqas Kamar, and Zahid Ullah. Hello to all 42 of you. And if I missed your name, I'm sorry. And I hope that you feel included. I know that you don't get to really unmute because you can imagine it could become like an Itwar Bazaar kind of situation. So let me share my screen, tell you a little bit more about myself as I do. So yeah, the main thing of importance is that I went to Harvard University on the Fulbright. I studied at the Graduate School of Education and I studied human development and psychology there. background in education, psychology, and technology. I've been teaching since I was 15 years old with out of school children. And Alhamdulillah, I'm still working with out of school children today with Teach the World Foundation, and we do digital micro schools, especially in Sindh and with the government of Sindh. So just want to check in, Zubair, my screen is visible.
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right, so this is one of two workshops. We are doing quantitative today, and we are going to be doing verbal tomorrow. What I will say about questions is that you can put it up on the webinar chat. If there are not too many questions and if they're not repeated questions, then I'll try to answer them during. Otherwise, I'll leave some time for the end as well. So you will not get a chance to really speak, but if you put your question out, I can read and respond to it. Okay. Since there's 48 of you here, I'm just going to actually preliminary give you a couple of disclaimers right at the start so you don't have to keep asking that question. There's no one perfect score. Of course, you can get a full score. Even with a full score, a university could still reject you because it's not just based on your score, it's also based on who you are as a person, what your research objectives are, what your personal statement is, and you as an individual are more than just one score. That being said, the GRE is pretty much like a prerequisite at most almost all of the universities, especially the better ones. That did change a bit during COVID, but it's still there, and they've made the GRE shorter now, so it's much easier and faster to do. I don't know if it's easier, but it's definitely less time to give the test. A score above 300 is considered to be a good, like, I mean, a fighting score. But then it depends on your choice of university. Are you going in top 200? Are you going in top 100? Are you going in the top 50 or the top 20? And of course, as it gets more and more competitive, so does the score. So I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm working with MIT Masters in Business Analytics students through Teach the World Foundation, and their program is even more competitive than the Harvard MBA right now. So the Harvard MBA has got a 12%, 12 to 13, 14%, depending on the year acceptance rate. And obviously, everyone's not even going to apply. Only the cream who think they can get in will apply generally. But the MIT Masters in Business Analytics has a 6% acceptance rate. And the average GRE quant score is 166 out of 170. But you can imagine that probably the rest of the 94% of people who applied also had really, really good GRE scores. So it's more than just a score, but the more competitive the university, generally the higher kind of score is expected, but it's not an entire make or break. There's a lot of other things also. So with that being said, let's try to do our best and let's find out today what the GRE quantitative section is about. So we're going to look at a few of the policies and also look at what's in the new exam. And then we'll talk about the GRE quant section and the types of questions and the examples with some answering tips and techniques. The first sort of thing I'm going to say is actually, I'm going to go right to the end here, and which says how and where to prepare, because a lot of people actually want to know that really up, want to remember that more than anything else. So and it links into what's new and what's old. Unfortunately, right now in the market internationally, the publishers haven't really changed their material much. So even though it's the new GRE and they revised it in like a few years ago, 2 years ago, the books that most of them are and the tests, most of them are still based on the older GRE. So it's the same stuff, but we'll talk about what has changed. You can basically, I would suggest that ETS books are really good. Kaplan and Princeton is really good. You've got Manhattan, you've got Magoosh. If you plan on really hitting your highest potential, you should plan on studying for 3 to 5 months. And in 3 to 5 months, you should be doing two comprehensive books, somewhere between 10 to 20 tests, and about three workbooks, three in quant and three in verbal, and one essay book, two vocabulary books. That's if you really want to hit your highest potential and you're willing to work for 5 months. Obviously, there'll be people who'll only work 1 month, and there'll be people who don't do any work, and there'll be people who do 2 months, and people who do 3 months and 4 months. That's up to you. But if you want to know your highest potential, that happens between 3 to 5 months. Okay, that's my opinion. You're free to have your own opinion. The duration of the test now has shortened to 2 hours, and the fees is around the same. It's $205. The scores are valid for 5 years. So for example, if you do the test now and you apply next year, and you go for a PhD, you may have to do the GRE again somewhere during the PhD. So 5 years is a lot, but also not a lot of time. You can send scores free to foreign institutions. So by the time you actually register, not the time you register, but the time you actually do your test day, you should know which four institutions you want to get your score sent free to. After that, it would cost you $25 more to send your score to any other institutions. It's a computer-based test. It's offered at two testing centers that I know of in Islamabad. I don't know where you guys are from. You might be from Karachi, Lahore, Peshawar. But when you go to register on ets.org, my.ets, you will find out what the closest center is to you. And it's offered Monday to Thursday every week, all year round, except for like US or national public holidays. Now, there's an option to test at home, which some people do. I recommend you don't take that option. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's not about the money. The thing is that at home, you're completely responsible if something goes wrong. Whereas if you test at a center, the center has everything taken care of, right? So the center will have backup power, for example. The center will have backup internet. You may have backup power, but if something goes wrong, then they're not responsible for it. Whereas if something happens at the center will be responsible for it. The center will make sure that either nothing happens, or if something happens, they will take the responsibility because you've paid to be at the center. The other thing with at home is some people try to do some cheating and things like that. I really don't recommend doing such things. एंड में आपको उधर ही जाना है. यू हैव टू गो एंड डू योर डिग्री, राइट? तो चीटिंग करके डिग्री कौन सी हो जाएगी? एंड अक्सर चीटिंग में फिर आपके स्कोर्स भी कैंसिल हो सकते हैं. सो आई जस्ट डोंट recommend trying to do any hanky panky or testing at home in general. Okay. If you test at the center, um, you have to bring your passport. I don't know what the thing at home is. I don't recommend that, so I don't know. But you need a valid passport to give your GRE at a testing center. Your NIC is not going to work. An expired passport is not going to work. You need a current valid passport. And the idea also is that if you're doing the GRE, you're planning on going abroad, so you'll need your passport anyways. So if you don't have a passport, it could take quite some time because the government of Pakistan has been really slow these days with passport giving. So I suggest you apply as soon as possible for a passport if you don't have one. Okay, so what is this test about? Here we'll be talking about the old and new test material, what is updated, and so don't worry about that. That's coming. Um, the test, initially this comes as part of a thing of intelligence testing in general. Intelligence testing started with basically the needs of the US Army because they wanted to make sure that people who have access to live ammunition, grenades, and the like have a certain level of intelligence and know, don't put their own teammates in danger. Um, and from intelligence testing, it came to something that how do we know which students are more likely to do well in university? Because obviously your GPAs are specific to where you went to in your undergrad, and they don't mean the same thing. Uh, a GPA from LUMS may be easier or harder than a GPA from Punjab University or Habib University. There's no way really to tell. And therefore, this is one test which puts everybody on the same playing field, so we can be able to compare different candidates on their test scores and know how likely they are to do well in a certain program. And what does it really test? It tests how attentive you are, how meticulous you are to detail. Did you read the question correctly? Did you answer what they wanted you to answer? Then it also tests your problem solving skills and your logic skills per se. So logic isn't written here, but your ability to organize, analyze, logically hold different aspects of a problem and then solve them, to think critically about what is asked, have numerical reasoning, being able to comprehend, especially your reading and passages, and your spatial reasoning, which is basically your idea of time, space, shape, and how things are related to each other in, for example, like in an XY plane, the Cartesian plane, as they call it. So this all is tested, and this is like the sort of basic skills upon which you get a GRE score. Um, Latent skills, as they say. So the test got changed in September 22nd, and like I said, unfortunately, still there isn't a lot of material that is specifically for the new test, but all the old material does apply to the new test, because you'll see what's changed is has been more in terms of timing and quantity. So previously you used to have 20 questions, two sections of 20 questions each, and you had 35 minutes. And you also had an experimental section, a dummy section, which wasn't scored, but you didn't know which one it was. Now there is no experimental, there's no dummy, there's just two sections. One is 21 minutes with 12 questions, and one is 26 minutes with 15 questions. Now the nature of questions has not changed. So the types of questions which we'll go through, that remains the same. The topics remains the same. So in quant, nothing has changed in quantitative. There have been some other changes in verbal, with one essay being removed, but in quantitative, nothing has changed other than the fact that there's lesser questions and therefore less time also to answer those questions. And then there's less sections. There's no experimental or dummy section. So that's all that's changed. Nothing else has changed. So no matter where you do your prep from, even if it's from a book from 2018 or 2017, it will still have the exact same questions that are tested today. It's just that now there are fewer of them. Before, though, because there were so many questions, it was also a test of stamina. Like, you would get tired. It was a 4 hours test. But now it's a 2 hours test, so it's not stamina as much anymore. It's accuracy and time. That's really what's important. So the other thing that's tested is, because it's shorter, and there's only one essay instead of two essays. The test scores arrive in 8 to 10 days, and before they used to arrive in 10-15 days. Now you get a score then and there of all your MCQs, but your essay score comes afterwards. So you'll find out how much you got out of 340. You'll know out of 170, 170. But the essay has one human grader and one AI grader. So the human grader will be take some time before he grades it and gives it back to you. Excuse me. Obviously, since the scoring hasn't changed, it's still out of 170, and it was 170 in the previous iteration of the GRE, and before that it was out of 1600. So it changed once in December 2011 or January 2012, and then after that it changed again in this 23. But since then the 170 score has changed, but since there's fewer questions, obviously each question has more weight. It's more important. Acha, Maheen, it's the test is whether the test is required or not depends on the places you're applying to. Um, More than the programs, it's usually according to the rules of the university. and most of the places, the vast majority of the places, it is compulsory. So you can check yourself if you're applying for biotechnology, or if you're applying for computer science or anything else. You can test it, you can see yourself in the universities you're interested in whether it's a requirement. Mostly it is. So topics are same, number of questions is reduced. So how is the nature changed? I don't know what you mean nature is changed. How the nature has, I don't say the nature has changed. It's just fewer questions of the same nature. Okay, Hira. And is it more difficult to score higher on the new GRE? What do the stats say? I'm not sure what the stats say, but I have been teaching somebody recently, and I've been looking at it, and I don't think it's difficult to score higher on the new GRE. In fact, my opinion on the matter is it's kind of easier to score a bit higher, which means the curve will be in the same place. But before, if 300 was considered pretty decent score, now it might be 305. So it's easier now, I think, to score past 300. Um, I think one of the reasons is because the test is shorter. So, the stamina isn't a question, a concern anymore, right? It's just accuracy and time. In the GRE, there is a quantitative section, a verbal section, and an essay section. All of them are compulsory to the GRE, Saira. Are teach GRE online? Hira, please reframe your question. Are you teaching GRE online? Um, can I give GRE after applying to Fulbright scholarship? Okay, so GRE is required to apply for the Fulbright. You need to do your GRE before the Fulbright. You can do your TOEFL afterwards, only if you're selected. Hira, I do teach, but I also have a job, so I'm quite exclusive actually. So, yeah. Now, the computer adaptive testing is something which is like this tree diagram. And so, Saira, we already talked about source for preparation. I'll come at the end. So, all of these questions I think are done for the moment. ETS is the one best source. Obviously, ETS is the official testing. Now I'm going to let this Q&A go for 15-20 minutes till we get more into the test. So please hold your questions. Or feel free to type them, but I'm not responding for another 15 minutes. I'm just going to do some slides. Adaptive means that it will adapt to your level, right? And so the way it works right now is it's section level adapted. So that first section we talked about in quant, which is 12 questions in 21 minutes. And then the next one is 26 minutes, 15 questions. That first section that you'll get on those 12 questions, if you, let's say you get them all correct, then you'll be up here, this excellent bar. After that, in the second section, it'll give you a really difficult section. Okay, but no matter what you do, you'll still probably end up scoring higher than if in the first section you had done very poorly, because then it'll give you an easy second section, and then even if you get it all correct, you won't be in the same place as this person here who went excellent and then did poorly. If you did poorly at the start, then you're just given an easy section, because the first section, it's like वो मोटा मोटा check कर रहे हैं कि आप किस band में हो. Oh, you're in the 130 to 150. Okay, you're in 150 to 160. You're in 160 to 170. In fact, I have a really great thing that somebody's made for it. Let me show you. Yeah. So, where did it go? There it is. So you can see here, this is an unofficial table that somebody made, and I found it online. So in section 1, if you do it really well, you're in this band, and then it'll zero in based on your second section where you are exactly. So being in this band, if you get all 12 correct in section 1, you can see even if you get 0 in section 2, you're still getting a 150. Okay, and it becomes so much easier. So it's very, very important to do really well in section one. That's what it's really about, right? Okay, so what is the quantitative section measuring? It's measuring your ability to understand, interpret, analyze, solve problems using mathematical models, applying basic skills. And so these skills really come from your, you can say, like fifth to eighth grade. So the math on it is not difficult in terms of its skills. Like, yes, you need to know Pythagoras theorem, you need to know a few quadratic formulas, you need to know area. You don't need to know like calculus or differentiation or trigonometry or integration or linear algebra or matrices. None of that comes. What comes is those basic skills and basic concepts, but given in such a way that you really have to think and reason and use a lot of logic to understand what needs to be done with those basic skills and topics. So you can see that these are the topics that are included: exponents, roots, fractions, whole numbers, equations, functions, expressions, figures, shapes, principles of lines and angles, um, your basic descriptive statistics, mean, median, mode, variance, standard deviation, interquartiles, and then the probability and permutations is a bit tough, and then so is sets and Venn diagrams, but it's not very tough. It's just like your basic stuff. There's no Bayesian probability, for example. It's simple probability. So Venn diagrams, of course, does come. I'm not going to answer questions which have already been answered. Like, that's, not nice. I can't keep repeating answers to the same questions. All of this. So there's four different types of questions: quantitative comparisons, multiple choice with a single answer. These are always given in circles. Multiple choice with more than one answer. These are always have answer choices given as squares or rectangle boxes, and numeric entry. Let's go over them one by one. So quantitative comparison, this might be a new kind of method. Honestly, I've mostly only seen it in the GRE, right? And the way is that it gives you two columns. It gives you some information, and then it gives you column A and column B, and it puts some value or some expression in column A and some value or expression in column B, and you have to determine uh, whether this is A, B, C, or D. With A meaning quantity A is greater, B meaning quantity B is greater, C meaning that the two quantities are the same, and D means that there's multiple answers that conflict. Sometimes A is greater, sometimes B is greater, sometimes they're equal. It depends. So D means the relationship cannot be determined from the information given. D does not mean that there is no answer. D means that there's possibly more than one answer which conflict with each other. So sometimes people just like, I can't do this question, it must be D. That's the wrong way to think about it. You should be able to do the question and understand there's more than one answer. It could be A, it could be B, therefore it is D. Because you cannot say which one of the two is correct. If X is 2, then A is correct. If X is 5, B is correct. That means you have to answer D. Let's do an example. So what do you guys think about this? Now, the answer of this is obviously you can do 54% of 360, which means 54 divided by 100. That takes care of the percentage sign. And off means multiplied by 360. So 54% of 360 will be a number. And that number is definitely going to be greater than 150. How do I know that? Because even 50% of 360 is 180, right? So definitely 54% is going to be some number greater than 180. Maybe it's 192 or something like that. 6, 18, 24, 204, whatever it is. It's definitely greater than quantity B. So here I will answer A. Quantity A is greater. It'll always be greater. Okay. Here's another, here's a different example. This is of MCQ 1 answer choice. So remember I said There are four types of question: quantitative comparison, MCQ one answer, MCQ more than one answer, and numeric entry. This was quantitative comparison. This is MCQ. This one we're quite familiar with. We've been given this many times in our life. You can see it's given through circles here, means there's you only have to pick one. The circle is another indicator of that, but it also says it. It says which of the following, right? So it's only one. So furthest from the number one on the number line, that will be minus 10, because the number line has 0 in the center, and on the left it keeps getting smaller and smaller, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, and on the right hand side it keeps getting greater and greater, and it's looking for the absolute distance, because when it's talking about which is furthest, it's talking about distance. When you're talking about distance, you don't care about positive and negative, you just care how far is it. So the number from minus 10 to 1 is 11 units far away, so that's your answer. Whereas the one from 1 to 10 is only 9 units far away. So it's not E, it's A. And in these types of questions, you always look at the extreme values, A and E. And notice that they're always organized from smallest to largest. Now here's an MCQ with two answer choices. The difference here is that generally you can see that it's given from A to F, and it has these square boxes around it, right? This has those round boxes, this has square boxes, not round boxes, round ovals, and this has square boxes. So which of the following integers are multiples of 2 and 3? Why don't you guys put the answer in the answer choices in the Q&A? Who would like to put an answer for this? 12, 18, 16. Right. So that's true that if we want to be a multiple of both 2 and 3, we need to be a multiple of 3 and even. So 8 is not a multiple of 3, 9 is a multiple of 3, it's not even, 12 is a multiple of 3 and is even, and so it works. So does 18, and so does 36. 21 also does not work because it's not even. If it's not even, it's not a multiple of 2. So C, D, and F. We know that this question has multiple answers, Hira. So that's what it says. MCQ, it doesn't mean two answer choices. This is badly written. It means multiple answer choices. It means more than one is what it should have said. Thank you for that. This should say more than one, right? So there can be 3, there can be 4, but there won't be only one answer choice. Here's the final type of question. This question is called numeric entry. Now, numeric entry is such that you actually have to type in the answer. Okay? And the way that you type in the answer is you just use the keyboard. So what do you think is the answer to this question? One pen costs 25 cents and a marker costs 35 cents. At those prices, what is the total cost of 18 pens and 100 markers? Nabila, we'll go, I'll share some strategies with you, and just remind me at the end, I will answer this question of avoiding common mistakes. 53.25, let's see. So 100 markers will times 35 cents each, that'll be $3.5, $35. So $35 for the markers, and then this will be 2.5 and 5 minus half, 4.5. 4.5 and 35 is 39.5. Absolutely correct. It's a simple case of just multiplying the number of pens with the cost of the pens, the number of markers with the number of markers, and then you get an answer 39.5, and you have to write 39 point or dot 5. Now here are some answer strategies. Now, in the answer strategies, the first thing is when you see this picture, what comes to your mind, right? It's like there's an odd one out. So if you have a sort of situation where every 4 of them look the same, and you have to pick only one, and one of them looks different, that one that looks different is likely going to be the answer, because all of these are A, B, C, D, and this is your E, this is your, odd one out. So that's one of the answer strategies. It's called process of well, it's not really process, it's the odd one out, which is a separate strategy, but it's linked to process of elimination, which is that if you know that it's not A, it's not B, it's not C, it's not D, what's the last one? That's called the process of elimination. So this picture actually is a different strategy. It's called the odd one out, and then there's a strategy called process of elimination. Uh, Also in the GRE, it's really amazing that you actually don't have to calculate as often as you think. So, so many times you can just estimate to get an answer. We did that when I said 54% of 360 versus, on the other side there was 150. I know even 50% of 360 is more than 150. So why should I solve what that 4% is? I don't need to do that. I just need to give the correct answer. So in this case here, you can see that 30% of 50, right? Well, if I wanted it exactly, I would say 30% of 50. Well, what's 30% of 100? 30% of 100 is 30. So this is half, this would be half of 30, so it would be 15, right? So you could automatically say it's not going to be 100, it's not going to be 80, it's not going to be 30, right? How can 30% of 50? So you're actually only looking between A and B. And then between A and B, A is way too small. So even if you didn't do the calculation of exactly 30% of 50, but you just knew that 30% of 100 is 30, from there you could have eliminated all the others and had just come with B as being the answer choice. Now, here's another way to apply the process of elimination and the odd one out strategy that I was kind of talking to you about. Now, this is actually a fairly complicated question. If you take it piece by piece, you would have to say let n equal to a number and then see if cannot means will never be. So, in all cases, it will not be an integer. Now, certainly in some cases, you will have the number working and it becoming an integer. For example, if n is 4, 4 minus 2 is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So it is an integer if n is 4, but you don't know what n is, right? You have to look for an answer which cannot be, right? Now, if you were to sit and pick for each and every one of these, it would take you some time, which is fine. You'd still solve it. The moment you find that an integer works, you can eliminate it and you say it can't be A. And then you can say, oh, under root n, well, under root 9 is an integer, so it can't be B. But take another look at this. You've got two things going on. In one case, you've got fractions, you've got a numerator and a denominator. That's happening in A and C. And then what's happening in B and D is that you've got an under root. Okay. And then you've got this thing in E, which is both an under root and a fraction. That's the odd one out. Remember, we saw all those white sheep in the black one. This is definitely the most complicated out of all of them because it has the fraction and it has the under root. Therefore, this is most likely going to be the answer. And now you can start seeing no matter what you put in n, it's squared, so it'll become positive, but it'll become a fraction. Under root of a fraction cannot be an integer. That's just how it is. So you can try plugging in any number, but you'll find that E will never become an integer, and E is the answer. Your next thing is back solving and putting the answer in the question. Is it C 1515? Right, okay. Is it C? So not C, it was E. The answer was E, right? Now back solving is that when you normally you just go forward and you're like, oh, let me just solve this question. Like the way I do it, I call it like a bulldozer. Like I just bulldoze everything. And it's like I'm just gonna go get that answer. But sometimes that doesn't work, and sometimes it can be faster if that's not how you do it. For example, in this question, you say x is an integer, 2 is the remainder when 3x plus 4 is divided by 5. Then x could equal what? Now there is a way to forward solve this. I won't get necessarily, well, I think I have the time, so I'll show you. So it would be, so you have this number 3x plus 4, and when it's divided by 5, it leaves a remainder of 2. So what leaves a remainder of 2 when divided by 5? Let's look at the multiples of 5. The multiples of 5 are 5, 10, 15, and so on. And then if we add 2 to them, we'll get a remainder of 2. So the adding 2 will mean 7, 12, 17, 22, right? So, uh, what could x equal to? So then you would say, well, when 3x plus 4 is equal to 7, that means x is 1. Oh, that's not an option. 3x plus 4 is equal to 12. What could x equal to? So you would basically be looking at that, and you'd be able to solve one by one until you got a value of x that worked. The other way you could have done it was that if you just directly plugged in these values into this equation without doing any of the rest of this work that I had shown you. So if you just said, okay, if x is 3, then what is 3x plus 4? It's 3 into 3, 9. 9 plus 4, 13. Is 13 leave a remainder of 2 when divided by 5? No, it gives you a remainder of 3. What about 4? That becomes 12 and 4, 16. Does that work? No. What about 5? The 5 also will not work. 19. What about 6? 6, 12, 18 plus 4, 22. 6 works because 6 when plugged in here gives you 6, 12, 18. 18 plus 4 is 22. And we know that 22 divided by 5 is 5, 10, 15, 20, and a remainder of 2. Therefore, this is the answer. So you saw that in this case, actually what was simplest was to plug in the answer into the expression. This whole process is called back solving. Calculator is allowed. You get an on-screen calculator, but I would recommend that in your preparation you try not to use a calculator as much as possible, because it'll really increase your mental math and how you think about numbers. I'm going to answer a few more questions. Uh, pa, 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 pa. How do practice tests help with quantitative reasoning? Nabila, come on. I mean, practice, you know how practice helps. Practice makes perfect. So whether you do practice tests, whether you do practice workbooks, every practice helps you. So that's a fairly, common sense thing to say. If you're going for a running competition, you should be running every day before your competition. Um, that goes without saying that practice makes perfect, right? The third answer choice is plugging in. And the way we do with plugging in is that we choose an arbitrary number, right? Um, Over here, I've been given two columns. Quantity A column says 2x cubed, quantity B is 3x squared. Now, if I'm to determine one of these, so first of all, if you have a gut feeling that wants to tell you, oh, I can't answer this question, please put that away. In the GRE, you never go with that. You always go with trying to answer the question and see what your working finds out for you. So here you would have to say, okay, let x equal to 1, what happens? Let x equal to 2, what happens? And also, just to be fair, you might want to check what happens with a fraction like half, and what happens with a negative number, let's say negative 2 or negative half. And then there's some special cases which is 0 and 1. So let's see. If I plug in 0, they're both equal to 0. That means C. But if I plug in 1, then this becomes 2 and this becomes 3, which means B. Now, the moment I've gotten two conflicting answers, I actually answer D. All right? Yes, your researcher contributions are taken into account. So, for example, on the Fulbright, it might be 5% of your overall score as a candidate, what your publications are as a researcher. Also, your universities will also value that. It's like additional points go for it. Like you could say maybe 5% of yourself as a profile could do with things like your research contribution. But it also depends on the type of program you're applying to. If you're applying for a PhD, it'll definitely have a lot more weightage. Or if you're applying to a research-oriented master's, it'll definitely have more weightage. So over here, you could see there were multiple answer choices. If I went with 10, I would get here something like 1000, 2000, and over here, I would get only 300. So in that case, A would be greater. We're getting all these conflicting answers. But the moment you get two different answers or a single conflict, you answer D, and D is actually the correct answer to this question. So quantitative tips in general, make sure to answer exactly what's asked. So we had a question early on, how can I avoid common mistakes, right? uh, Make sure to answer exactly what's asked. So, for example, over here, a common mistake would be if you just checked one number and then said, "Oh, two में ये answer आ रहा है तो मैं ये mark करके चला जाता हूँ." You didn't check the other numbers. There could have been something else. Uh, इस case में जो है, if you had answered MCQ more than one answer choice, but you only picked one answer. You said, oh, 12 works, and you moved on. That would have been a very common mistake. You should definitely need to avoid that. If in this you didn't understand what is meant by furthest, right? And somehow you looked at negative numbers in some way, like, oh, it can't be negative, it has to be only in a positive number range, and you picked 10. That would have been a common mistake you could have avoided. Zubair, you'll need to field this question on Fulbright, GMAT versus GRE. Acha, make sure to note whether you asked to answer one answer choice or more than one answer choice. If you're asked to round off, you do it exactly as they say. If they ask you to round off and you don't round off, you'll get into a wrong answer. The other thing is examine to see if it's reasonable with respect to make sure, double check yourself. Is that a reasonable answer? Suppose in that question of 30% of 50, you somehow misread it and you're like, oh, 30. And then you just wait, hold on a second, just double check. Oh no, that can't be correct, right? That's 30% of 100. So this is how you avoid common mistakes, okay? And always give yourself a couple of seconds before you take the answer. Does my answer look all right? Does it seem reasonable? Does it seem fine? The other thing is computation. You don't need to always do computation. So, for example, the GRE will give you things in terms of under root, like the answer could be 5 under root 2. You don't have to actually calculate the under root. It'll give you a lot of answers, will be like, oh, the answer is something pi, 10 pi. So, always avoid unnecessary computation till the end. So, you always simplify wherever possible. So simplify wherever possible. Simplify is like, rather than do a long multiplication, if there's a numerator denominator. So for example, if I was doing 12 multiplied by 3 over 4, over here I would always simplify first. I would say, oh, that's 1 and that's 3. That's 3 into 3, 9. But in other cases, I don't need to simplify for something like 10 pi. Another common mistake is if you get something like let's say under root 18. Now under root 18 is actually something that is under root 9 into 2, right? And so that can be written as 2 under root 3. But you don't actually have to compute what this is. You just have to give it in this form. So when you do a lot of practice, you will start understanding how the GRE, like how the GRE works. There's like a psychology of the GRE. There's a certain way that it wants you to answer questions, that it wants you to look at things. So keep working in constants such as pi or simplified under roots. Avoid using the calculator unless it's absolutely necessary, because when you use the calculator you stop thinking and then you spend a lot of time like pressing in the buttons, but actually maybe you could have just estimated and it would have given you a definitely correct answer. Sometimes it's very efficient to look at the least and the greatest possible value. So that number on the question on the number line, all you really needed to consider was minus 10 and 10. All the other numbers in between were not important because they couldn't possibly give you something like the furthest. You only have to look at this value, that's 10. So that's also quite common generally in the GRE. So it's a tip that just look at the least of the greatest possible value. Within a section, you can skip if you want. You can do the easy questions first, and you can skip a hard one, return to it later. And then you can always guess an answer and return back to it. If you're spending too much time on one question, it could be a quicksand, it could be a danger question. So you want to make sure that you leave enough time for all questions and you can return to that really dangerous question afterwards, because it could just suck up all your time and then you have like 6 questions left and you have 5 minutes and now you're stressed. Other strategies are anticipate the question as you're reading the question, anticipate what the answer is going to be, anticipate what you need to do in a reading passage, anticipate like where in that passage that is, read actively. Yes, you can skip a question, you can sort, analyze, note data as soon as you read it, manage your time well. Sleep well before the night before the test. It's like a competition, it's like a game day. You need to sleep well, don't study the day before the test. Relax the day before the test, even the 2 3 days before the test. Just do some light vocabulary, don't do a test. You should have been, done all your major prep a couple of days before the test day. Don't try to prepare the last day. This is not that kind of a test. It's a thinking test, it's a reasoning test. It's not like you have to remember a lot of formulas or much anything. And so don't stress, and make sure you take something. Now it's a 2 hour test, so you don't have those breaks in between. Before it was a 4 hour test, so make sure you take some high energy stuff. But at least before going to the test, have like a good light, easy to digest breakfast, things like bananas and porridge and things like that. So coming back to how and where to prepare, um, there is a website, mathisfun.com, for basic math for those of us who haven't had good math teachers and think maybe we're weak. You can go through this website in detail. I don't know if the center has any nice basic math books. I don't. There are some available on Amazon, one or two, like which look really good, but I don't have them. Um, the ETS website itself has a lot of material. So when you go to register yourself, it'll give you free PowerPep software, so free tests. It'll also give you a lot of free like reference material, review material, different sort of examples to the essays and all of that. Uh, I like ETS, Kaplan, and Princeton. Princeton Review. I will say though that the Kaplan over time has become not as nice as it used to be. It used to be really much better, but the last book they released was in 2018, and I did have a lot of critiques of it, but I still do like Kaplan a lot. ETS, of course, is the best single prep. So the ETS has a book of tests, it has a math workbook, it has an English workbook. You should try to do 3 workbooks, like one from the ETS and then maybe one from Kaplan and Princeton each, or you can choose Manhattan or Magoosh, some other one. And you should do 2 to 3 comprehensive books. You should do 2 vocabulary books, like the 1500 word plus vocabulary books. And you should do one essay book, or online इतना ज़्यादा essay पे material नहीं है. Try to do your vocabulary 3 times a day. You should read from Al daily every day. And yeah, you just have to do a lot of basic math and a lot of reasoning, a lot of practice for math, really. The formulas are not hard, it's just getting used to the types of questions they ask. So average time, if you want to know for questions, you can just simply say, well, if I have 21 minutes and I have 12 questions, well, what's 21 divided by 12? 1.75. But that's not exactly how it'll be, because certain questions you'll want to spend 20 seconds, 30 seconds on. Other questions you might want to devote 3 to 4 minutes on. Yeah, I would recommend you do at least 1500 words of GRE vocabulary. I have Said Book Bank or other publishers will have their own sort of book lists. And here's one that I've been using online. Not online, but I downloaded it. This is, but any sort of like vocabulary list like this, Kaplan has its own, Princeton has its own, ETS doesn't have it. So, yeah. Uh, so if you need confirmation on the mock test, ask the center, call them up. 3 to 5 months is my recommendation for prep if you really want to hit your full potential. तो somebody will say भाई मैं तो एक महीने में कर लूंगा, ठीक है आप कर लें एक महीने में, कोई आपको रोक नहीं रहा, आप कल भी जाके कर लें, कोई आपको रोक नहीं रहा. My opinion as somebody who's been in this field since I was 17 years old, over 20 years in this field, if you really want to do well, you should spend between 3 to 5 months in preparation. Yeah, barren high frequency, fine. Uh, I do not promote piracy, but there is a website called Library Genesis. Check it out. You can download books from there. I'm not going to provide them. That's on you. The clock will be available online on the testing center. Yes, and so you have the Power Prep software to look at from ETS. When you download it, it'll give you an idea, and then a mock test will give you an idea. If you do, by the way, so Kaplan, Princeton, they also have these online offerings available, not the courses, but just access to their question banks. Will 50, 60, $100 type I think आता है, not the classes, just the question banks and papers. It's really worth it as well. I don't know about gregmat.com. This question has come before. I don't know. I haven't spent enough time on that. How about Magoosh flashcards? I don't know. How about it? I personally find flashcards of any company will be too few. You should aim for at least learning 1500 plus new words. Flashcard में 1500 तो नहीं होंगे, आपको कितने मिल जाएंगे? 100, 200, 500. So that's why I don't. Otherwise, flashcards is great. You can make your own. You can buy them. Uh, I don't know if things will be automatically rejected based on what, Shiraz, but I can tell you, you should definitely aim to score more than a 300, 310 plus ideally. No, uh, library Genesis. Genesis, like the word Bible, Genesis, like at the beginning, and library as in the word library. Mm, if you're talking about Fulbright, I think GRE is required. Uh, I'm not going to be sharing my slides, but there will be a recording uploaded. Will skipped question be replaced or will be? No, you can return to the skipped question. It won't be replaced by another question. Is it good to give GRE if it's optional for grad school? Most places it's not optional. If it's optional for you, it depends. Do you think you'll get a good enough score? You can give the test first and then see if your score is good. You can submit it. If your score is not good, then don't submit it. All right, that's our time. Thank you, everyone. I don't. So, where is there a minimum score now to apply for the Fulbright on the GRE? Because the rules
Yeah,
changed.
so you need to get 145 in each section in order to qualify for the Fulbright scholarship. If in either in the quant section or in the verbal section, if your score is below 145, your application will be rejected. It will not be regarded. So that's the minimum cutoff score. And if there's more questions, please hold them off for maybe till tomorrow if they're about the GRE preparation. We do have another session with Heather tomorrow. It is on the GRE verbal. Be sure to register for that the same way you registered for this session. And we are out of time, so I apologies for any questions which are not answered. Hopefully, we can get to them tomorrow. Same time, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. We'll hopefully see you then. Heather, thank you very much, and
Yeah,
I'll see you
Tyra,
tomorrow.
please come at the start for such questions. We already discussed things like fees and registrations right at the start. So be early tomorrow, please. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather, and thank you everyone else. Have a good evening.
Bye.